What if fear of the truth didn't hold us back?
Instead of having to do the research yourself, we've done it for you. Tune in each week as real moms drop some truth bombs.
Answers start now.
You said llama jamma, right?
Flamma.
Oh,
F.
flamma.
Yeah.
I thought like llama jama, like
Mama llama.
mama llama.
Red pajama.
Exactly what I thought it was. I spelled it that way, like
I hope you're
llama
recording
llama
this.
red pajama.
Oh, it is great. Mama. Red pajama. Feels so lonely
Okay.
without his mama.
Who did that?
Ludicrous.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
For reference, it's a kid's book.
Yeah.
And like Ludacris was like, I want to rap this. I'm pretty sure it's Ludacris.
Oh, maybe I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he crushes it. And now you can't unhear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm still doing this wrong. Okay.
That's right.
I missed the capital F
That's right. That's
for
right.
fuck my life. That's what I'm happening today. Can't get it. Shit right.
It's okay.
I did spell flamma jamma correctly. That made me really feel good.
The good news is that you are mostly just listening today.
I can't wait to hear about penises.
That's like
literally,
you.
yeah, we're literally talking
He's like,
about
this is
that.
my exit. He's like, I thought this was a mother's podcast. Why are you guys talking about penises? Oh my God.
I will be inside.
Poor Taylor.
I understand.
Taylor's our producer. He's awesome, but he's probably blushing his head off right now.
He's probably
like, oh my God.
scared of us. Who did I let
like,
into my studio?
I know. We're never going to be allowed to rent here again.
No.
Shout
no.
out.
Shout out to Taylor. And he has great tea.
He's amazing tea. And local. I mean,
Yeah. I was telling
he's
him.
scrunchy and he doesn't know it.
No, he kind of does. We were talking a little bit before. And,
Oh.
and we were talking about tinctures and everything and like natural remedies. And I was like, your cough. Brittainy actually turned me on to cherry bark blend.
Oh,
You
yeah.
should check that out.
Yeah, because it works with your cough. Because obviously that's lingering from the last time he was here.
Yeah. So,
Speaking of tinctures, I did poor River is getting over her ear infection,
yeah.
and I did. There's no good way to smell garlic, but
the
garlic oil in
garlic
your
oil?
ear is a whole other different because it's an internal smell at that
It
point.
is, yeah.
So she was not happy about it, but it's gone literally in 2 days
It's crazy. I use that.
with the colloidal silver.
Yeah. So good.
Literally the best.
Yeah.
So that's not what we're here to talk about today.
Today we're going to talk about penises. So today we're going to talk about a very controversial topic, but also a topic that I don't believe is talked about enough. Like people do not know the history of circumcision. People do not know where it stems from, why we do it, especially in the United States. So I kind of want to just debunk some things and give some facts.
See, I don't have a boy, so I don't have to
Yeah.
think about this.
I had to-
I don't know yet, but we'll see.
I had to go into it when we were having Easton. We found out he was a boy. So
Yeah.
basically, where it started for me, like a lot of parents, is I went back and forth on whether we were going to circumcise or not, and I did my research.
Oh, so this was never just an immediate like, whatever. This is what you do. You have a boy, you circumcise. You literally was like you immediately you were questioning doing that.
Oh no, that's a really good question actually. So I don't know if you've heard of the show Adam Ruins Everything. It's a like truth telling, fact telling show where they kind of debunk a bunch of really common things in a very comedic way. And I remember watching that, I think back in like 2017 or something around that time. And I remember them doing an episode on circumcision. And one of the things that he said that kind of stuck with me was, all right, it's known because of the hygienic reasons. It's the reasons why we do it. That's what they say. But we don't cut off our butts and we poop every day. So it was kind of like a really good, But it's true.
Why?
Like, think about it. We poop every day and we're not cutting off like our butt cheeks. So why are we cutting off the foreskin when it's something that was given to us from, birth? So that stuck with me and it made me think about what I wanted to do with my son when the time came around and I found out I was having a boy. And I just want to start this off with, I realized that I'm also talking about my son's penis, essentially. and he's going to listen to this probably later on, or someone's
Well,
going to listen to this.
he's gonna know eventually.
Oh, he's going to know. But I mean, not everyone's going to, now his friends will know, whoever listens to this. And I kind of, was kind of going back and forth. I'm like, do I want to talk about this? I'm essentially talking about his penis. But I think this is an important topic to talk about because by the time he is that age where kids can make fun of and whatnot and talk about it, I want it to be normalized. So I think talking about it now will help him in the future. So I want to make this not as taboo as it might be right now. But essentially, we started doing some research, and I left it up to my husband. I was like, hey, Justin, this is going to be ultimately your decision. And we were, not to get into this again, but it's a very important thing. If you are thinking about not doing the vitamin K shot, you cannot get circumcised. Because...
Okay. Go ahead.
Because essentially what the vitamin K shot is, it helps, bleeding. It helps coagulate that blood, clot that blood so then you don't bleed out. So if you have any kind of brain bleeding or any kind of surgeries or anything like that, it helps make sure that...
which circumcision would be considered a surgery.
Right. And we just opted to do the oral vitamin K, but they can't measure that because you're giving it to them in a tincture versus them giving it, measuring out a shot. So they can't, medically do the circumcision. So we just said, okay, we'll probably do it later on. We went to our pediatrician, asked if there was anybody in the state of Tennessee that would do a circumcision. And it was like a piece of paper kind of passed. It felt like a drug deal, honestly. Yeah, this guy will do it. And we just never made that call. I think what happened, looking back on it, I know my husband's reason now, but you get to know this little baby and just like the thought of just putting them under the knife just didn't feel right in our gut. So a lot of this was gut feelings. I did my research, I understood, but my husband was like, I really just want him to make that decision when he's older if he decides to do it. Now, obviously, there's psychological effects when he's older if he does decide to do it. You can't win with most of the stuff like we talked about before in the last episode, like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, in a way.
Well, when would he make that decision?
When he's old enough, when he says, even if he comes to me at like 16 or 17, whatever, and he wants to, then I'll do it. But I would say for him to know and really understand everything like we understand it and then making that decision based on that.
Right. And so when would he realize that he has an uncircumcised penis?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean,
dude, because boys in the locker room setting, right?
Right.
That would be like when does it, that would be the age of sexuality and reason. That would be like when they're in their teens. Right.
So whenever he wants to make that decision and he fully understands.
Or is it like you tell them when they're younger, like, by the way, you're uncircumcised?
I don't know when I plan on having that discussion. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering. Yeah, that's what I would be like. Okay, do I tell them before the feeling of, not that he would be shameful, but just like before that happens, and he could be, I'm giving you the example of, I was in 5th grade. I was 12 when I got big boobs, and it was a very huge thing because it was different than everybody else, and so. I think you're going to go along a lot with your research, but you did tell me, you said about 50% of people now are not circumcising.
Yes. So it's going to be more normalized by the time he does reach that age. So I don't know the exact age when I'm going to have that talk with him, but I probably would do it before.
Yeah. Wow. The girls at that age are going to have a real crazy time because I don't think I've ever encountered that because I don't think that anyone talked about it. Right? Back when we were kids, it was just done. There was no...
You're saying you didn't encounter one in my
lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe one? I don't know. But I never noticed if I did. it wasn't something that so in my mind, every penis is circumcised. So...
Right.
Because we just grew up, that was it. That's the thing.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, that's most of what I experienced as well until I did encounter one. And I didn't even notice it. Like, he had to tell me. And I was like, wait, what? Huh?
Okay, because you hear all these stories on, like, other podcasts of more, obviously, like, sexual-focused women. And they talk about how different and weird it is.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's really not.
I mean, with the turtleneck on, it's a little different. But it's all the same, if you know what I'm saying, without getting...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think because the only thing that I've ever heard about it is cleanliness.
Yeah.
Like, keeping clean is a hard thing, right?
Yeah.
Because of the turtleneck?
No, So that's actually a myth, and I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Actually.
All right. I'm
Yeah.
ready for it. I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're good. So yeah, we knew that it was just 50-50 shot, and that made us feel a lot better about it.
Where did you learn that? Just by research, or the doctors did tell you?
Doctors and research. So
Okay.
yeah, we asked.
So the hospitals are basically like, this is becoming more of a norm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Kind of like obviously we're going to talk about breastfeeding and formula, or we've talked about breastfeeding and formula. Like that has become more the norm. You went through a cycle in history where you were only breastfed, or you even had a wet nurse.
Yeah.
And then basically formula took over in the 40s and 50s, and it became the thing, and nobody breastfed really. It was like all-time low breastfeeding.
Right.
And now you're about probably 50-50, I would think, right?
Yeah.
At least women try to breastfeed in the beginning, but as far as breastfeeding all the way till toddler years, when you would assume they're on a bottle.
It's taboo.
So it's funny how the pendulum swings. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to work out in this world as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, we are one of the leading countries that do circumcision. It's really only leading as in like us, Muslim countries, and Africa. That's about it. Every other country except
Muslim
for
countries?
Muslims. Yes.
Okay, so
Muslim
I thought it was
countries,
a specific, if we're talking religion, I thought it was a specific Jewish.
Muslim and Jews.
Okay.
Yes. So those are the only ones that are really circumcising. They do it for religious reasons. We're doing it more for cultural reasons.
Okay.
And that stems back from the Victorian era, where there was a lot of Victorian prudes. There was also a lot of medical justification saying that men shouldn't be masturbating because it will affect their immune systems, that they should be retaining semen in order to keep their immune systems up.
So circumcising in a way was to alleviate hand jobs,
Yes.
but that doesn't really work, does it?
No.
Okay.
So that's where it stems from.
Okay.
And oddly enough, the person that really pushed this was John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of cornflakes.
Kellogg's.
Right?
Kellogg's, man. They're just on the shit list.
Yeah, which is odd. And he also was pushing at the time, female circumcision in the form of using some kind of acid that they would pour.
That's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It never took off, thank God. But if we're looking at it like those two things, why?
And what was the point of female circumcision?
Same thing. To repress those sexual.
Yeah, because you hear about that in some third world countries that they still do that, again, for cultural, religious reasons. But you see female circumcisions and you're like, it is totally an inhumane response.
Right.
And so it's funny that in one sexuality or one gender, it isn't. And in the other, it is acceptable.
And what's crazy is that female circumcision in the U.S. was legal up until 1996, which is a crazy fact, right? Crazy.
1996?
1996. You could legally have it done. Now it's illegal, but yes.
Jeez Louise.
Yes.
Was it legalized as in it was legal, or it just wasn't something that was talked about and then it was made illegal? Like LSD, right? Like LSD basically was a drug that was on the market. It wasn't regulated, and so in a sense they went against it and made it illegal. Or was it legally in the books that you could perform that as a doctor?
I'm pretty sure it was. Do not quote me here, but I'm pretty sure it was legally accepted because
So
it was
they
a
knew and
religious.
they were doing it.
Yes, the people living here in the United States used it as a religious practice. To have.
I feel like I saw an episode on this in like General Hospital or something, or like Law and Order SUV.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense,
Right? Because it's mutilation.
It's mutilation, which also brings the point. If we want to get into this, like, what's the difference between we're really upset about trans operations. It's essentially genital mutilation, right? 500 of those happen every year, where 3,000 circumcisions happen every single day. Like, what's the difference?
3,000 a day?
3,000 a day. So you kind of have to compare it. I mean, obviously it's a cultural norm that we have, but we have to kind of dig and be like, why? And that's what I think is so
Right.
interesting about this topic, is that why is it for females one way, but not that way for a male?
Okay, so Lee Harvey Kellogg came up with this
Yeah.
in order to prevent pleasure.
Yes.
Okay, and then what happened?
So kind of go back a little bit. Essentially, before even John Harvey
Oh, John Harvey.
Yeah, John Harvey. I was like,
Lee
wait a
Harvey
minute.
Oswald. I'm messing up my names.
I think he went to Abraham Lincoln.
I wonder if he was circumcised.
Might explain a lot. No, but there's a lot of medical justifications, not really a lot of medical facts. And it seems like those justifications over the years change by the decade. So to kind of go back in history, in the 1830s, first it was because of epilepsy. They said that it prevented epilepsy. Then in the 1860s,
Does it?
I don't know because it's debunked every single time. Like if someone would be like, that has no correlation. So then it's debunked. But in order to keep the circumcision conversation going or the circumcisions going, they'd find a new reason. So in the 1860s, it's masturbation. 1870s, you have clubfoot. 1880s,
Clubfoot.
I don't know what that is, but that's what it was.
Okay.
1880s was diarrhea. 1900s, sexual immorality. 1920s, this is when penile cancer came into play. 1940s, venereal disease. 1950s, cervical cancer. 1960s, STDs. 1980s, UTIs, and then you have in the 1990s to present, HIV is the one that they're saying, hey, like, in order to prevent HIV, you better get circumcised. So it kept getting debunked, whatever that, I guess, disease of the moment.
Okay, so let's go back to UTI. Okay, so a lot of it sounds more like sexual things, right? Like masturbation, UTIs. What was the other one?
HIV.
HIV. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's starting to sound like it's I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be in trouble for saying this, but this starts to feel like it's, HIV and particularly like UTIs. You think of like male UTIs tend to happen when you're engaging in a different kind of sexual activity.
Right.
And so it almost feels like it's targeted.
Right.
Towards a certain population of sexuality, but that's just me reading into it because, right?
No, and I think that's what they were trying to do back in the 1860s, right? Is prevent that from happening. And then what happened from there was that, oh, I just want my sons to look like mine, and it just kind of generationally just started.
Was that for Justin in the beginning? Was he like, I don't want it to be different?
Yeah. I mean, that's where it really stems from. It's more of a cultural thing here in the United States than it is a cleanliness issue. It's not a hygienic issue. Nobody really thinks about that. It's just, oh, well, I'm circumcised, might as well have my son circumcised. Like, why wouldn't I? It's just nobody really looks at it, and they just say, oh, hygiene. But there's not a lot of research to really back that. And having a son that is uncircumcised, I'm going to tell you right now, there's no difference. There's no difference than, like, our showers are the same. Our baths are the same. Like, you're washing the same things. Now, there might be a different protocol once he gets older and it starts to retract, but I'm not retracting the skin. That's something you do not want to do, which a lot of pediatricians back in the day, and maybe even now today, will tell you to do, is to retract it. You don't want to do that. It can really do a lot of damage.
Wait, when you're cleaning?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so within how do damage in what way?
The frenulum is the part of the penis. It's a band of tissue found on your foreskin. It intersects with the head.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the frenulum here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like at the top, and
like,
that's what's kind of pulling it up and down. Mm-hmm. So when you're pulling that back,
so it's a thin piece of skin.
Yes. So when you're pulling that back, and it's supposed to retract naturally. When you're pulling that back and you're making it retract, it's essentially like pulling your fingernail off. It's adhered to your finger. So if you're pulling off your fingernail, how much does that hurt? You don't want to do that to the foreskin until it's ready to do it naturally.
So what would by in circumcision then by default, what would pre doing that do by cutting it off? What are you exposing them to?
So first of all, they lose a lot of nerve endings. So a lot of sexual pleasure is actually in the foreskin.
Which then I guess maybe Harvey was right.
In a way.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it didn't stop them from masturbating.
Oh, 1,000%. Right. But you do lose feeling.
You do lose feeling. It's not as sexually pleasurable. But it's just, if you go back to the whole female, imagine not having your clitoris, not having that feeling. That's the same thing. Like, you can still have sexual pleasure, right? But it's not going to be from that. So that's essentially what we're doing to our boys. And that's why I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So just looking into that deeper.
I mean, what are technically the negatives, though, of keeping that?
Keeping the foreskin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because obviously there's pros and cons to everything you do. You can't just say, don't circumcise because there's absolutely, like,
Yeah.
except for obviously, drinking and smoking tobacco. There's absolutely no plus to smoking something and having a nicotine addiction.
Right.
Right. We know that by and far, once you're addicted to it, there is a lot more health risks. Obviously, that's not always the case. And even though you're saying there's not a lot of evidence backed up, it has been done for so long. Are there absolutely no benefits to having a circumcision?
No. I mean,
Outside of a religious reason. And what is the religious reason?
the religious reason goes back to a sacrifice. It's found in Genesis. I can't tell you exactly where in Genesis, but it's a sacrifice between Abraham and God. So it says
But
that
the Torah, but that's not in the Torah. That would be Israel, right?
Yes,
So that'd be
yes.
Jewish. In the Muslim book, what's that?
I'm not
The Quran?
yeah, I'm not familiar with what exactly that one is.
Okay.
So sorry.
Haven't done all your research. Actually. Didn't know I was going to ask you that.
There's a lot.
Okay, but obviously in these books there are some measure of that this is supposed to be done for what reason. I'm just curious as we look more into it, like what is that reason?
Yeah.
Like for them, for the religious reason, what does that mean?
I didn't really get into the religious just because I wanted to just concentrate on the cultural reasons why we do it in the United States, kind of not getting into the religious part of it.
Yeah.
So I just
I
concentrate on
agree.
that.
I'm just curious.
No, you're good. I just know that it's more of a sacrifice, between Abraham and God.
Yeah.
It's written in
Genesis.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I'd say, the benefits, good to go back to your question, the benefits of doing it is reduced risk of urinary tract infections. And again, these are more medical justifications. There's not a huge...
Like are there scientific studies on these to look up?
There is. But it's not as... These reasons aren't very prevalent. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's not very common that these are happening. They can't really trace back to it being that's the reason that people are getting UTIs.
Yeah, but is there a significant difference in men who are circumcised versus not in UTIs?
No,
Okay.
no, there's not. It's about 1.8%.
Difference. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have a 2% chance more of getting a UTI.
HIV. Yeah.
Or HIV.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know the exact statistic.
Which again
for
is only
UTIs.
contracted if somebody else has HIV as well.
Correct.
Okay.
And another thing about not getting getting circumcised is a lot of people will say, okay, well, it's reducing my chances of getting HIV, so therefore I'm not going to wear a condom. So another thing.
Oh, so people who are circumcised have in their minds, they are relieved of this risk. And so they're less likely to wear protection because they think that they are invincible in the sense that they're circumcised.
Correct.
Interesting.
It's not everybody, right? A lot of people just wear condoms just to wear condoms because they know it protects
I don't
against
think many people wear condoms.
Yeah.
I think if we really delved into it, we're obviously different podcasts, different people, but I would venture to really have a conversation with women who have been sexually active in your 20s and 30s, and I really want to ask you how many raw dog did you do? Because maybe one boyfriend that I've had,
right?
And so I'm like, even with education and all of that stuff, it's not the preferred method.
No.
Right. So I'm just, right. Like I have a trouble understanding when people say like, obviously people use condoms. I'm like, obviously in my world, no.
But
I
guess my point was, I don't think people were thinking, oh, I'm like they're not thinking, oh, I'm circumcised, I'm good.
No,
like they're not.
But medically, they're saying that because they're less likely. Right.
Right. So
there's less and I agree with this too in the case of birth control. Once we go down that rabbit hole, there's less sexual education for our children, which we're going to argue what age of reason that is, but there is less sexual education of being responsible, sexual responsibility, because we have those, in my mind, those methods, right? Like birth control is so easy. You're like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. I'm less at risk.
Right.
The same thing with being, circumcised, or because those things are there, maybe we're a little bit lax on educating our children on responsible sex behavior.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's
Curious to see.
true. But yeah, essentially getting back to that penile cancer, It's very, very rare, and it usually only shows up in elderly, and it only shows up in homeless people, mostly homeless people. So people that don't really have access to.
But you're more at risk if you're uncircumcised?
Correct.
By how much? Do you know that percentage?
I do not know that percentage. I just know that it's very, very, very rare.
Penile
statistic.
cancer is
Yes,
very rare.
Very rare.
Okay.
So if you're showering every day, you're probably fine. But if you're not showering every day, you're not being hygienic, then once you get to that, later age in life, then you could be at risk.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the risks.
And so those are the two risks that you were like, okay, they are not significant enough for me post all the other benefits of uncircumcision.
Correct.
To go down this route.
Correct. And mostly that was because of the psychological damage that it could potentially do. So when they go into the circumcision surgery, they are strapped down and they are numbed with, and some people don't even use a numbing agent. They are numbed with a needle, which that is what makes the baby scream. And these babies are like, 2-3 days old. And then some kind of tool is inserted and then they cut around. And where it got me was when I heard somebody say the first sexual encounter of somebody touching their genitals is having them, strapped down with their arms and, mutilated. That's where I was like, I can't.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
And the somatic responses that they have later on, like they don't remember it. They don't remember the actual act. But there's been studies shown that the ones that are circumcised later on have some kind of response when they go to get vaccinated because they're learning to trust you at the early. They're super young, right? They're learning to trust and who they should trust. And their first encounter with all of this is being strapped down and having a part of your body cut off. They'll say babies will fall asleep, and that's been proven to be wrong. They're just disassociating. So just the traumatic, somatic responses that they can have later on in life, that also just was like, that's what got me. Like I can handle the hygiene part, right? Like if they get a UTI, I don't love antibiotics, but hey, antibiotics, just like with girls.
Right.
If girls aren't, circumcised, they get UTIs. We handle them.
Right.
HIV. Everyone should be using a condom. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or not. So those are all things that I think can be prevented, but that's a psychological thing.
Right.
So that's where it really.
Yeah,
really
I mean,
got
I
me.
will say we ended up doing, obviously not circumcising, but we did have some kind of surgery. At 3 months, River had a tongue tie. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the arguments that I had was that I didn't want her to go through that. However, it came down to an eating thing, right? So they do wrap the baby up, but mom's not in the room. And so that's how I understood, right? So for PJ, when we did talk about, we had a small conversation about circumcision. He was like, well, as long as it's happening, I'm going to be in the room. And I remember when we did the tongue tie, they were like, we do not want the parents in the room because we do not want the baby looking over and associating the parent with pain. So that was really hard for me because I was like, okay, so they're experiencing pain.
Yep.
But we did go with that decision. And so that it inevitably helped her eat better. Right. So that's where I'm like, okay, I definitely don't want that.
And I'll tell you, same thing. He was 2 months old. I did the same thing. Had a tongue tie, and it was for him to eat better, speak better. There's reasons behind that.
Right.
And it's not as invasive as...
No, it's a laser, and it's quick.
Yes.
It's like a second. There's no needles. There's no cutting.
Right. This is 15 minutes.
That's wild.
15 minutes, and they will take you to either a soundproof room or a room far away enough from the parents so they cannot hear anything. And a lot of people that are speaking up against circumcision are people that were nurses or doctors that have seen enough, and they're just like, this is not right.
Right.
Why are we doing this to our
Because
children?
also being like, that's a hefty, for everyone in the room to be responsible for what happens to, because there's obviously have to be issues gone with it, right? There's got to be circumcision's gone wrong.
Oh, 100%. Botches where like it literally, they're called hidden penises, where they retract into their bodies. Like the head of the penis completely retracts in.
What?
Yes. And lots of I actually have a crazy statistic. Let me find it real quick. Oh, So the accidents happen more than they're often than they're reported. And there's actually no reporting system.
No reporting system on circumcision injuries.
Correct. And the doctor says this isn't technically malpractice because I repair one of these per week. So if you think about that, they say it's estimated. They don't have a secure, or an actual reporting system.
Why?
I don't know the answer to that question.
If they make a mistake, that should be reported.
Right.
Why is that not being reported?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a lot of things aren't reported, right? I mean,
yeah, but this is a surgery,
right?
Right, like if something gets when you do heart surgery, if something gets left in there or something goes wrong, that's reported. If I'm
remembering correctly, it was because it happens in the hospital, and then you go home for a few days, and usually something happens afterwards, and they just don't report it because it's like two different visits essentially. So that's why he's saying I'm fixing these, so it's not reported essentially.
Oh, he does one fix a week.
Yes, that's what this particular doctor said. Based on that information, it's about 1 in 200 circumcisions. So what they say. That's not an actual fact.
Okay.
But just estimated is what they would say. But 1 in 200.
Estimated is 1 in 200 will go wrong.
Yes. Which is crazy. Like it's a crazy statistic. We're doing this every day.
Right. But but then walk me through getting it done when you're older. So, Easton grows up and he's like, you know what? I don't care. I want to feel quote unquote in the norm, and I'm going to do it. What happens then? Is it not more? Because this is the argument that they gave me in the tongue tie situation, right?
Yeah.
Is that you do it now and inevitably they forget, right? Which is the conversation we just had.
Correct.
So they're more likely to remember the trauma afterwards if they choose to do it later.
Mm-hmm. So that's unfortunately the risk that I'm willing to take. I hope that I raise a young man that is proud of his body and proud of his whole body, and I want him to have that autonomy over his body.
Yeah.
So if he decides to make the decision, he will know all the
Which that
facts.
makes a ton of sense. I mean, if we're going to go down this road socially right now to talk about body autonomy in the reproductive system of women and in trans rights, then in this sense that you are making a decision. This baby's born, so the argument's out there, right? That this is a baby human being who's out there in the world who now deserves their own human rights, and that would be a decision made for them before they're old enough to make the decision for themselves.
Right. There's a lot of men out there that will sit there, and I'm probably going to get crap for this podcast. First of all, they're going to attack me for this because they feel like now I'm telling them, hey, you've been violated.
Well,
right?
It's cognitive dissonance. And this is something that I think we're going to learn a lot as we keep moving forward. Because I almost texted you and I was like, hey, do we want to save some of this stuff for later? Because I feel like some of the conversations we decided to have in the first season are really tough conversations that may turn people off or maybe great, whatever. We don't know. But it did strike me that we're going after some things or we're talking about some things that are instituted beliefs, systems that have been brought up for hundreds of years at this point. And now we're saying, hey, there's a couple studies out there that's saying that this isn't actually what it should be. So
why?
Right. Or when you start to question it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same way when we start to question vaccines. It's the same thing when we start to question the food system, right? Big food. I mean, we just saw, Vani Hari went to Kellogg's, and even though there is absolutely no reason to not be on this woman's side about, yes, we do not want to poison our kids with these terrible ingredients that are now factually scientific fact that they harm the children that they are promoted against. And quite honestly, it's a little bit crazy that most of the issues that we have with food are directed towards products towards children. So we're saying all that, but you still have a whole other line of people being like, we've done this our whole life. Right. And so that's what I think we march against when we start to question the system. When we talked about our birth stories, my OB was great until I started asking questions. Right. And it wasn't asking questions as if I wasn't going to make the decision. I very well have been okay, cool, still going with it, you know, but thanks for the answer. I think where people misunderstand is maybe you and I are the same, and a lot of people listening will say that too, is when you ask a question and someone meets you with aggression, you automatically think something's up.
100%.
Right? Because that's 101 gaslighting. You know, when you're with a boyfriend, you're like, hey, who you texting? And they're like, why are you mad?
You're like, oh, well,
okay,
now I
you're
know.
fucking a girl. You know?
Yeah.
And so in the same route, I think, yes, people are going to come against us, but you're like, it's because you're asking a question that no one wants to hear.
Right.
Because it's been done forever. Let it go. Don't go into it. And that's it. Right. And I think that's the problem, is no one's saying it's good or bad. At the end of the day, I'm pretty sure if we have a son, I am not convincing PJ not to do this.
Yeah.
I personally am probably more listening to you. I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right, you know?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's a decision between the two parents.
Yeah.
And so I like, that is something that you're going to have to go down the line. Same thing with everything every choice that you make for your child is a choice that you've made for your child, whether it's against or for something.
And there's pros and cons to every side of that.
Right. And so there's nothing wrong. And I think, again, there's nothing wrong with the choices that you choose to make. It's that as we talk about our choices, we hope there's a level of like, that makes sense. And the problem is things like circumcision, you can't go back on. So when I think that's where most people will be a little bit turned off, is like, if they've made a decision, they're listening to this, they do some research and they figured it out and they've already made that decision, there's no going back. And so the guilt sets in. Right. And then the rage sets in because you don't want to believe that maybe there could have been a different way.
Yes.
But ultimately, as long as you have a healthy, happy kid and you made the decision with knowledge, I feel like there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, that's a really good point, because what I want to say is that like our hospital systems, our medical systems, it's not your fault. Like if you're like sitting here and you're listening to this, you're like, oh my gosh, I've circumcised my kid. I wish I didn't, right? That's not your fault. I'm here to say that. This is our medical system not giving you all the facts. They're just making you sign a consent form and that's it. They don't give you any kind of ammunition. That's why we're doing this. We want to give you the research before.
Yeah. I mean, my OB straight up told me that if I did not give my baby a vitamin K shot, that they would not deliver in that hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then we were like, okay, well, as long as preservative free and all that, and you're fighting. Here's the thing about any hospital. Again, we talked about this before with our birth stories, is at the end of the day, the hospital is a business and it runs on liability. Every business has liability. It's what insurance and claims are for. And so there are people who I believe are genuinely good. They go into the medical industry because they have good hearts and they want to be there for people.
Yes.
They are working for a business that cannot afford to get sued every single time something happens. And so they run a list of, hey, you're entering our facility. And I mean, we'll get into hospitals too, how they're funded and who's pulling strings there. But they're giving you a list of demands saying, you show up in our house and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you can what people don't realize is, even if you sign the paper, I still push people to ask the questions, right? Because even if you don't want to, if I said to them, because I said, I want to stand up when I give birth. And they're like, well, we're not catching the baby. And I was like, okay, so you're going to let the baby fucking fall on the floor?
Yeah.
And so that was like a big thing, which is why we've moved towards home birth for the second baby, because I was like, there's got to be more autonomy here. There's no way that two people giving birth are going to just be a subject of a system and nobody around them is hearing stuff. Right. That's where things go wrong. And also, people have biases, and we can talk about Black maternal health, but I'm a big proponent in the less you feel you have a voice, the more things go wrong.
Yeah.
And in this case, same things with circumcision. It's like, look, no one's saying good, bad, or indifferent of the choices that you make, but I just encourage it to be a choice that you make and not one that's made for you.
Exactly.
That you can't listen to later.
Exactly. What I think is also interesting about you saying, like, when you start to ask questions, what's interesting is that a lot of these medical professionals don't know the answer to that because they're only trained one way.
Yeah.
They only know one thing. They don't know all the other.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes really hard. You might get frustrated with the medical professional, but they just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, though, what I remember when I ended up going, reason why we got our doula, one of the things on like TikTok or Instagram that came up was like some meme, and it was like the top 5 red flags of an OB. And it was like, if your OB uses their tenure against you. And that was something that happened to me.
Oh,
I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
Basically. And it was a question over erythromycin. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never seen a baby have a reaction to erythromycin. And I was like, you know what, bitch, mine did.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause I still went through the erythromycin, but she reacted to it. She had a burn.
Okay.
And so it was like that is that feeling of defeat as a human being, of being like, I know I'm a layperson. I'm coming into an establishment. You are obviously, you've had medical background. You've been taught this. I know I would never want to insult your intelligence. I'm coming and asking you questions because I am genuinely curious.
Yeah.
And when you meet it back with aggression to me, then I go, you're fucking full of shit.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. There's no way, because in any argument, when they tell you in a relationship, if someone puts their armor up, there's something to hide. And that is what made me go down the scrunchy route, right? Not because I think inherently getting a circumcision is wrong, right, or indifferent.
Right.
Not because I think vaccines are right, wrong, or indifferent, but because when I ask a question, I get met with, shut the fuck up and do what we tell you. I can't sit by that.
No.
Because I would never do that in any other course of life. I would never just blindly sign something or blindly put my life in someone's hands and blindly put my daughter's life in my baby's life in someone's hands without 100% knowing what I'm doing.
Right.
And I think that sometimes that these, big pharma, big tech, big money, big food, hospitals, a lot of these larger establishments take advantage of people and they just hand you the piece of paper.
1,000%.
We live in the land of convenience.
Yeah.
And so for us, we're like, great.
Yeah.
I went to the hospital. I got an epidural. Birth, right? Like I didn't have to think about it. I'm doing home birth classes, and last night was my first one. And I remember one of the girls was saying that her family is she's had a mom who's had 5 C-sections, and she blames her body for not being able to have natural birth. And I thought about this, and I'm like, we shame the person who is the most vulnerable in those situations. It is not like, first off, there's no shame in C-sections. Mm-hmm. Second off, it is not, if anything is to blame, it is the system that has set us up to feel that we have to fail. And in order to have birth, it has to look like pain-free. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's something that I learned last night was like it doesn't have to be pain-free. Just like not circumcising your child doesn't mean that you're putting them in a harder life for whatever reason. Right. It means that life doesn't have to be cut in order to be lived. Like, okay, you have to have a few extra steps of cleanliness.
Right.
And hygiene. And
right.
Sexual education.
Right.
For a little less convenience. But in the what you trade is
autonomy.
The autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and you just summed up exactly why.
Let's just say
yeah. So
I don't know. Let us know what you guys think.
Yeah.
Do you circumcise or do you not circumcise? Do you feel good about your decision? You stand by your decision. There's no regrets.
No. And I would say, I did a dive, obviously, before we did this, but deep diving more for this episode really reaffirmed my decision of doing what we did. Because really, honestly, like I said, we get to know this little baby after 2 weeks. I mean, we're thinking, okay, let's just go get him circumcised by that guy down in, Brentwood or whatever. And we just never did it. And I think it was just like, how can we, he's now like, he's got the personality, like we know him. It's a lot easier to do when you have, it's like 1 or 2 days and you're just in this newborn fog and you're just like, here you go, the convenience route, right? Like I'll do whatever they're telling me to do. But it's just, we couldn't do it after that. And then deep diving, I'm like, okay, I'm really glad that I didn't do it.
Right.
And I'll cross that bridge when it happens, but you can't go back. Like you said, you can't get your foreskin back. I mean, there are ways to restore it from what my research shows.
Oh, people are restoring foreskin now.
People can restore it to a certain degree. They will
but
never.
That's happening.
That's happening. They'll never have the frenulum connected back to the head of the penis, but they can have some of the foreskin back.
But people are electing to do this right now.
Yes. It's more of a tool that they can put on and just stretch the skin over whatever's left of your foreskin.
Yeah, but obviously scientifically wise, I'm intrigued, but my curiosity goes to, you are now seeing people as adults being like, I want that back.
Yes. There's a lot of trauma behind it. There's a lot of family.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Which is crazy because they learn about it, but a lot of people don't learn about it.
So where did you learn? I guess let's end this of telling people like where can they learn
resources?
about it?
I would say a really good resource if you just want to sit down and have all the information just thrown at you at once. On Amazon Prime, there is a documentary called American Circumcision, and it's by Brendan Marotta, I believe is his last name. And then also the resource that I looked at before going ahead and making that decision was yourwholebaby.org.
Yourwholebaby.org.
They have a lot of information on there, and they break it down for the most important points that you really need to know. But they also have videos and pictures that you can see. They're like, this is not pornography. This is for educational purposes.
Yeah.
Where you can see the differences between like an infant's penis, adult penis, like just showing the differences.
Amazing.
Because it really is, for American men, it's a cosmetic thing at this point. So that's what American men are typically looking at. And I think women are really looking at like, what is it doing psychologically to my baby? What is it doing, sexually down the road to my baby?
Well, thanks you guys for listening.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been a very informative episode
I hope so.
The Truth Moms podcast.